if you look at Singapore and where, obviously there's always got to be a benchmark of, who you benchmark yourselves with. It'd be really interesting to get your perspective on who do you benchmark Singapore with now, for what you're trying to drive as a vision for Singapore as part of SGInnovate.
We benchmark against. What I don't do is I don't spend time studying other ecosystems. I don't look at what do the Israelis do and how can we try and do that, because everybody has their own uniqueness. The Israeli ecosystem is so different from the Singapore ecosystem that the idea of studying it and trying to import aspects of it to me is not helpful. But what we do try to do is have good working relationships with many ecosystems. We've had close working relationships with the ambassadors of 8 countries already this year, that we've had different events and we do things on a regular basis. And so it's that sort of collaboration. So in some cases, we have a great partnership with Germany and France, in Israel, in Switzerland, in the UK. What we don't try to do is then say it's because of this or that. It's sort of a time and a place, and those things evolve. And so we might be heavy in one and light in another, and then a few weeks later it inverts, and we are heavier with the one and now lighter with the other. And so I think it's a tough one for me. I would just slice it as it depends, but our key is not so much the replication or the learning, it's to have a close working relationship with as many as we can, but on a human level.
I guess part of the reason I was asking that question was to try and understand, how you work with these centers of innovation. Is it more around just taking learnings, or is it around collaborating and working closely with, how do you do the engagement?
Specific example, last week I was in Geneva to speak about AI for good at a UN-backed event. And the person with whom I shared the stage was an EU commissioner, and her basic premise, and I loved speaking with her and debating with her. We enjoyed a nice long lunch together before the panel and then agreed to stay in touch after the panel, even though we had differing views. Her view was GDPR, or the European view of data privacy, is going to be the basis upon which data privacy will be handled around the world. Right? It's only a matter of time. And I said, I couldn't disagree more. Right? Now I understand why the EU looks at GDPR, and there are aspects of it that I get, but it doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree. Other countries do not feel the same way about citizen data, or citizens themselves don't feel the same way about data as might be the case in any European country.
That must have taken a lot of courage to be debating that sitting.
Well, it's fun to sit on stage and you can say with a smile, and the answer is I don't agree.
I think all governments are taking steps to sort of align their thought process around privacy and data privacy, and Singapore is no exception. I mean, we've had the PDPA, the Personal Data Protection Act, for years, so it's not like GDPR came in and
that was at my old team. I know that when I was at the IDA, that's when the PDPC and PDPC, the Commission and the PDPA, the Act came into effect.
That's right.
But again, thinking about that from consumer relationships and do I want somebody to market to me and so on, this really core fundamental ethical debate, which is if I were to say to you that I can demonstrate an ability to improve the speed and accuracy of diagnostics for certain types of tumors, but I need more medical images, privatized and anonymized, but I need more medical images. Is it your right as a citizen of country X to say no? Or is it my right as somebody trying to pursue the improvement of healthcare for humanity to say, I win? So again, there's not a right or a wrong answer, but if the state can take land in order to put a railway through, which is the case in the United States, for example, eminent domain, there's court process and compensation, but it can still happen. Why would I not do the same thing for medical data to try and advance breakthroughs? So I think what we as society have to do is continue this debate. What's the trade? We give a lot of information for convenience, but we don't want to give information for things that don't directly affect us, which is, why would I give you information that might improve healthcare 10 years from now? That doesn't help me unless I'm, humanitarian in thinking.
Yeah.
But if I give you information and you can improve the delivery of my package tomorrow morning, of course I'll give it to you. So I think those are the things that really have to come into this sort of where do we stand as society. And then you get 10 different people from 10 different countries in a room, and you're going to come up with a whole bunch of different perspectives depending on culture.
I've got to say, what you're doing at SGInnovate, it's not just about technology innovation, it's not just R&D. All these things like legislation, the ethical issues, they're all going to come into play. How do you cope with all this? How do you guys decide, okay, how are we going to streamline this and make it really easy for the entrepreneurs to execute and implement?
Well, I mean, for a start, we couldn't. And so all we do then is work with lots of great teammates. So the benefit is we try and bring, benefit of where we sit within Singapore government is we try and bring insight or information to different people that have the ability to make some of these choices with legislation or regulation. We also work with other governments, back to this earlier point, sit down with leaders from different countries. We put forward a point of view and at the same time work with lots of different investors and entrepreneurs to see where is it worth pushing.
And I guess it's a little bit different because you're deep tech startups, you're not looking for immediate commercial monetization tomorrow or next year. It's a staggered approach. There's a lot of developmental work that's involved.
Which is true, but that's also why it's hard to attract some of the venture capital that we might like. When it's exciting to work with quantum technologies because there's a lot of really interesting potential that quantum technologies represent.
Yeah.
But considering that the technology risk itself is high, which is will this work and will it work repeatably and scalably, that becomes a very difficult discussion. I can guarantee that I can articulate how to get 100,000 users onboarded for a consumer-facing app much more easily than quantum key distribution. And so from that perspective, attracting investors is hard. But the quality of what it might mean to humanity down the road in terms of improved security, improved communications could be much, much more impactful. Yeah. But understandably, if I come back to the basic mantra, how do I make as much money as I can in the shortest possible time with the least amount of risk? Investing as an off-the-street VC into quantum technology, that's not the answer. So that's why we believe we have a role. How can we step into that breach and try and be an investor and a believer in some of that technology and then buy time for those scientists to do their thing in order for other investors to say, oh, that's amazing.
No, and look, I think quantum computing is a great example of where Singapore's got a lot of collaboration going on with academia, the research organizations like A-Star and the entrepreneurs. So I think it's a great space. But I did want to sort of wrap on a key point that would really help the up-and-coming entrepreneurs, especially ones that are actually focused on this deep tech space. What do they need to do to get attention from SGInnovate? I mean, what's the criteria? How do they fill a form? Do they drop in and say, I'd like to see Steve and his team? How does it work?
As a general statement, the easiest way to get to know us is to be a part of the community that we are working to build. If there's somebody in Singapore, then it's just show up at some of these events and get engaged, get involved.
And just finally, I mean, if you had to give some guidance in terms of the 2 or 3 things you look for as part of the evaluation process, when you look at companies you want to get involved in, entrepreneurs you want to get involved with, what would those be?
First thing, are the people that are in that zone, people that have the competency to be in that zone? Second would be, is there something that's worth pursuing? So it has to be a reasonable team or a great team, has to be a reasonable problem that people are seeking to solve. And it has to be a clear moment or aspect of differentiation, right? Yes, there are people doing X. My view on that is this, right? I seek to do it like this because at the end of the day, a customer has to understand why you compared to any other set of choices.
So the investor community, is it sort of limited to the Singapore investment community? Are you seeing
we've co-invested with investors from multiple countries, and we would always welcome an opportunity to invest with investors from multiple countries. And sometimes we've invested almost purely on the basis that we will be investing with investors from other countries, meaning if we are 50-50 on a particular opportunity and we realize that some of the other investors are great names from other markets, we say, you know what, this will be a great learning opportunity for us and for the founders that we're backing. So we will go in because it's an international platform of other investors. So absolutely.
Steve, I really want to thank you for your time. I think
my pleasure.
If you want to find more opportunities, I would suggest reach out to SGInnovate, to Steve's team.
But all of our information is on our website, so sginnovate.com if you want to learn more about the deep tech opportunities that have immersed in all the things that are going on. Get involved.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amit.